Recently, there have been many campus controversies about speech that members of the student body find offensive. As a result, some universities have adopted a broad concept of emotional safety. To protect students from certain ideas, offending voices have been suppressed. But that's not how it began. In the 1960s, the campus free speech movement was launched at the University of California, Berkeley. The university administration had barred students from protesting the Vietnam War. The reaction sent shockwaves through higher education.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels. And you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Today at Berkeley, the words of free speech leader Mario Savio are coming true. Last night, 1,000 students began a sit-in here in Sproul Hall. At 3 a.m., police began hauling the limp trespassers off to jail. These were the bodies in the wheels. Now, 12 hours later, the big teaching machine has come to a halt.
The problem was the administrative class. Unfortunately, starting around 2014, we saw students who had once been the best constituency for freedom of speech on campus start to really change their mind.
Known as one of America's most liberal campuses, UC Berkeley, a war zone over conservative speaker Milo Yiannopoulos' appearance here. A mob set fire to campus lights, Milo's name melting.
The strangest thing about this that made it so fundamentally different than the kids who were fighting in the 1960s was that whereas the activists from the free speech movement wanted less control by authority, in the last 10 years, the thing that I've seen much more of students is that they want more authority. Suddenly, students were coming in who were demanding new speech codes, they were demanding disinvitations, they were demanding trigger warnings and new policies that would restrict freedom of speech.
Just listen for 1 minute. You sure? I spent a lot of time preparing really hard questions. We're going to have a great dialogue if you let us continue.
This is the very definition of fascist behavior. Not only are they shutting me up, I can deal with that, but they are not allowing their fellow students to hear a range of view through the sheer exercise of brute force.
I believe we're taking freedom of speech for granted, partially because it's a victim of its own success. As things get more comfortable, as people have greater ability to surround themselves with people they agree with, they tend to become less willing to deal with uncomfortable things, and freedom of speech is, if done correctly, is uncomfortable.
We also understand humans in a different way today. We're probably 40% rational and 60% emotional. So you need to feel emotionally safe sometimes before you start thinking. But that doesn't mean that you should abolish thinking.
What we need to really teach a generation of students is that it's always valuable to know what people really think and why. Full stop.
We're not doing that because there's this moral condemnation and I'm not going to even engage with you.
I want to know what the other side is saying so that I can understand whether or not my position is correct, and if it is, the ways in which I need to sharpen it. I was at Wellesley College a few years ago, and I was there to give a talk, and a group of students got this false message about me. The students refused to come to my talk, but then created a phalanx down the hallway that I had to exit through. So there's a huge gauntlet. It was a physically very intimidating moment. You come out of a room, and there's probably 150 people lined up, angry at you, holding signs. I did not leave. I stood there and had a conversation with them for about 45 minutes. And what was really super interesting was that there were a number of women in the crowd there who later contacted me, who told me that they found it very life-changing to be part of a mob and to realize they had been misled. They were in the wrong mob. I am always sympathetic to the person yelling at me in the audience. I am always sympathetic to the student protesting me. because I vividly recognize that as myself. I could not have gotten where I am in my life were it not for protesters, were it not for women mostly who had objected to the way that they were being treated in the academy.
Every one of the top 100 schools had some kind of censorship incident since 2015. And if you factor in speech codes, lawsuits, free speech zones, 65% of them had an attempt to get a professor fired.
Today, we allow individual students to shut down entire classes. And that, to me, is the real problem. That we have so over-empowered individuals that they can now make a decision on behalf of all of us.
Digital culture has been an accelerant. It has made it easy to do something people have always done. In 1835, Alexis de Tocqueville comes to America and says that the biggest threat to liberty in America, it's not the government, it's what we today call canceling. He didn't have the term, but he gives a vivid description of all the ways in which people are socially, essentially shut out. They lose their livelihoods, their status, their friends, their professional associations, if they get out of line with certain points of view.
I was one of the first people canceled in 2001 after 9/11, and that was a canceling from the right, of course. You know, I mean, it's funny. Here we are 20 years later, and everyone I know, by the way, is more afraid of being canceled from the left. Not that the right doesn't still have a bunch of snowflakes, too. Nobody got canceled faster than Colin Kaepernick, and that was a right-wing canceling. But in general, when people think of canceling and when they fear it, they're talking about the left. They're talking about people who are way too sensitive and just are humorless buzzkills. Sadly, mostly the younger generation. That's a complete reversal right there. Used to be the young people who were free of mind. Now they're the ones with the stick up their ass. That to me is the saddest part of the whole thing. You know, I mean, save some outrage for the golden years because there's going to be some that you're going to need.
Starting with the digital revolution and the rise of social media, it becomes almost trivially easy for me to get an online mob of tens or hundreds of thousands of people to say, you know, Jonathan Rauch should be fired. The ability to gather these crowds so quickly and target them so devastatingly, that is new.
Controversy must be encouraged because it's the only way to advance knowledge, it's the only way to make moral progress, it secures the credibility of the academy, and it prevents perverse backlashes.
I can't claim to really be a victim of cancel culture because I'm in the privileged position of having tenure at a major university. The problem is the intimidation that it imposes on people who aren't in my enviable position. That is, in people starting out their careers, in graduate students, in postdocs, in assistant professors, in part-time lecturers, in journalists, whose positions are far more precarious and who have been put on notice. If you say something that seems to go against the prevailing orthodoxy, your career could be over.
And therefore, it's easy for people to say, you know what, it's better if I don't say anything. It's not worth it. But if everybody taking a particular position individually takes that point of view, then you completely distort public discourse.
Higher education was designed to be this unique space in which you questioned everything. You mentioned the unmentionable, you questioned the unquestionable. This is a hard thing to maintain, and it's impossible to maintain if you don't actually explain that mission to students. They need to be told on the first day, you're joining an unusual revolutionary process by which we question everything and we try to figure out what the world actually looks like, because despite what common sense tells you, the process of knowing the world as it actually is an arduous, difficult process that is never really over.
Open debate, I have found, is necessary to prevent perverse backlashes. The regressive left is an incubator of the alt-right, precisely because these are debates that don't take place in refereed forums in which the flaws in the extreme versions can be pointed out and mitigated.
The Chicago principles were a response to lots of shutting down of free speech on campuses.
President Robert Zimmer of the university in 2013 appointed a committee, and he asked me to chair it, that was asked to write a statement for the University of Chicago about freedom of expression on campus. The Chicago principles recognize that free and open inquiry and discourse is how you learn, and it's how universities both teach and how they create new knowledge. And the only way you can do that is by giving people the freedom to explore what they want to explore, to argue what they want to argue, to listen to one another, and to figure out, what you think the best answer is to often very complicated questions. It also recognized that the university should never suppress the advocacy of particular points of view.
If other people disagree with you, then what they should do is argue with you and try to persuade you that your position is wrong.
However surprising or shocking or offensive a particular idea or point of view may be, the right response to it is not censorship, it's response and argument and counter-speech. To my surprise, Princeton University recognized that it could adopt it, basically verbatim, and now roughly 80 other colleges and universities across the country have done the same.
I believe that free speech will make a comeback because it works so well, because it lets you know about problems, it lets you understand where the challenges are, it lets you know very simply how people really think and feel. The only way out of the current problems that we see are cultural values of freedom of speech.
We're kind of missing the point that if you're in favor of free speech, that means speech among those that you disagree with. Everyone's in favor of free speech for themselves and for people they agree with. But if you're uncomfortable defending free speech because you disagree with other people who are defending free speech, you really don't get free speech.
We need an all-of-society response in which every institution looks at itself and says, how can I make myself more resilient, more of an ally of truth and of free speech? That's what works if we can do it.
Students gain a special benefit by engaging with ideas and speakers whose views are at odds with their own. They may even be persuaded to revise or reject prior conclusions. And even if discussions and debates don't change students' perspectives, they will likely enhance the students' understanding and articulation of their own views. We all gain a more accurate impression of the world around us through exposure to multiple points of view. The movies we watch, the books we read, the art we see, the music we hear, the lessons we're taught. If we can absorb all of this freely and question and add to it freely, that allows each of us to grow and flourish as individuals. And, just maybe, it will also benefit the whole of humanity. I'm Nadine Strossen.